What's up, everybody? This is George back again with Warp Charge Gaming. Excited to give you this video here showing you 3 battles time-lapsed to my narration from Adepticon 2019. Each of the multiple kill team events at Adepticon were 64-man events broken down into 8 8-man pods with pod winners and overall winners. I decided to bring the Gellerpox Infected, one because they're beautifully painted by my business partner James Schaff. They are just an underrated army that I think are extremely fun to play, and I wanted to see how well I could do. Okay, so let's get into the action. So the Adepticon missions very much match the Nova Open missions from 2018, produced by GW once again, but this time the secondaries have been changed out to be match the secondaries that exist inside of Arena. There was a few additional missions that were added to the packet that have some interesting dynamics that we will mention as we arrive to. The first mission I played in the Friday morning event is Vital Supplies. I'm going up against Admech. In the Adepticon mission packet, one thing that's cool is that all the terrain is placed by the players before the game begins, splitting the terrain up evenly, picking one piece at a time after a roll-off, and then placing the terrain on the board more than 3 inches from the board edges and 3 inches apart from one another. We set up the terrain loosely with the 3-inch rule, sometimes going within a 2.5 or this or that. And you'll find that each player is placing the terrain to cover the objectives to be able to be safely held and creating lanes to travel across the board if they're close combat. If it's a shooty army, they're trying to spread the terrain out and create firing lanes to be able to target your models, or even some height advantage to be able to shoot down upon. So first we set up all the major pieces, saving a piece of scatter terrain for each of us to place anywhere on the board for the last piece. This is the same way that every board would be applying their terrain. We then discuss how we would like to agree upon the terrain functioning, always a good rule of thumb before you get started, checking which windows we can jump through, what counts as more than 1.5 inches tall that you have to count vertical distance on, things that are impassable, such and such. I roll a 5 for my deployment to his 2, then the lowest roll-off picks their side. He decides he likes my side better, and we switch sides of the table. The deployment zone is 6 inches into the map, going down the long side of the board. A Dawn of War style deployment, if you're familiar with 40K. In this situation, it's the Admech's guns versus the Gellerpox's close combat. No guns versus all guns. So we'll see how this gets going. I start by deploying all my flies. I get as close to the line as possible to prepare to grab objectives and charge into his lines to stop shooting. He makes a fire base with his Omni-Specs and comms supporting his bigger shots. I place my leader in the far right, hiding behind the crates, not targetable but out of range of the objective. We discussed as we set up that we both have about a 9-man team that we will break when 5 of our models are in jeopardy. We secretly chose our 3 secondaries. This mission and the matchup specifically put me in a great position. This is due to 2 of the secondary choices double up with one another that I had chosen. One of my secondaries is Domination, to have more models within 3 inches of the center, and the other one is Mission Critical Supplies, the mission-specific objective, where you get a secondary point for holding the center. This also plays well into the primaries, to hold more than your opponent each round, with the middle objective being the deciding factor in most cases. My 3rd secondary was Cut Apart, to kill in the fight phase, so I had a pretty good game plan going into this one. Once we're all set up, despite preferring 2nd initiative on the first turn, I end up winning the roll-off and end up having to go first, with an 8 to his 3, so I proceed to move. I start by moving a fly to the objective in the center, utilizing his height to try and hide behind the bulge of the piping. The flies being a default -1 to hit will be a -2 with the obstruction. I advanced my Zealot, Nasher, and Screamer up the right side of the board to the midfield, putting me in striking distance next turn to his gunners on the other side of the building holding the objective, but also hidden from most line of sight in his current position. I advance another fly to the center objective. I try to see if there's any way to score the objective with both flies without being within 2 inches of each other to try and avoid him getting to multi-shot them, but I cannot. They must be within 2 inches. I move my Combat Nightmare Hulk to the center objective, now firmly holding the center. I move a fly to the objective in the left corner and hug the terrain, confirming with my opponent that he agrees that I have moved into obstruction while holding the objective. Important to clarify your intent as you play. I advance my veteran Gellerpox Mutant to double up on the objective in the bottom left. I confirm his range, most being 30 inches, requiring being more than 15 inches away for a long shot, so I work to force him to move forward to ignore long shots. Due to having so many points tied in the center, I went ahead and took my final fly and fortified the middle. relying on all their negatives to hit to not just get shot off, and hopefully causing a distraction with the Hulk. The flies in the center also gave me a great position to charge his guns next turn, utilizing their ability to fly right over the terrain, unobstructed. So I was doubled up in the bottom left, held the center with 4 bodies, and I held the bottom right objective with the Nasher Screamer. Onto the Admech, he makes a bold move right out the gates. Without no guts, no glory. His first move was to take his combat-oriented Admech model and move it directly next to the objective, contesting it from my Nasher Screamer. This is a 2-wound model, and he was going to take the chance to try to survive whatever I threw at him, knowing that I don't have any shooting, and try to deny that from me getting more objectives than him on the first turn. He does no other movement, and he readies all of his guns. At the start of the shooting phase, I spend my 2 command points to do the rancid vomit tactic, the bread and butter of the Gellerpox. This is a thing that happens in the beginning of the shooting phase, but it is not a shooting attack. It is simply a tactic where I roll 3 dice, and on 5 pluses would cause mortal wounds to the target. This is a 2-wound model that is moved up on my Nasher Screamer, so I'm going to have to take a gamble and hope that this works out. The dice gods are with me though, and I land the 2 5s. Now I needed a 4 on a single dice roll with no command point reroll. I land a big 6 and I take him out for the first blood of the round. Big kill out the gates. This was the only thing I can do in the shooting phase, so we go to him to shoot all of his shots. He starts with a sniper and he spends a command point to give himself +1 to hit. He targets my Nightmare Hulk on the center objective, hits with a 6 and wounds for D3 damage. Cutting through my armor, he rolls the damage, only getting 1. I fail my Disgusting Resilient and go down to 3 wounds. Next, he fires his arc rifle at the Hulk in the center. He hits on a 4+ due to the obstruction and then lands a wound with a 3 from it being a strength 6 shot. It cuts right through my armor with its -1 AP, and I fail my 5-up Disgustingly Resilient, bringing the Hulk down to 2 wounds. His next shot, he shoots the Hulk again, rapid fire with another rifle. He hits once and gets a 5 to wound. I fail my 6+ armor save and then my 5+ Disgusting, and go down to 1 wound remaining. He eyes out his next shot and spots the Hulk through the window from his top right corner gunners on the other side of the building. He uses his last command point to give more bullets to his heavy specialist, shooting the Hulk on 1 wound. He hits both shots on the Hulk, but only wounds with 1. It cuts right through my armor. I need a 5+ Disgusting to avoid the injury roll, and this time I nail it after missing the last 3 saves. A good big roll. He takes his Assault 3 shots and targets the Hulk again. This time long shot and obstructed. He gets 1 hit and lands 1 wound, even needing to 5. This time, I fail my save and Disgusting, so we go to the injury roll. He needs a 5+ to take me out of action this time, though, because I'm in 1 inch of the obstruction. And he rolls a 1. The Hulk takes a flesh wound and stays in the fight. Next, his leader shoots his Phosphor Blast Pistol at the fly through the window, but he misses from all the negative modifiers. He shoots with his final shot at the veteran Gellerpox Mutant on the bottom left objective. He's within rapid fire, and it's open ground for him on this one. He lands the wound. I fail my 5+ invulnerable and my Disgusting save, but he only caused a flesh wound on the injury roll and has no command points left to re-roll it. So I got through the shooting phase with a couple of flesh wounds, was able to puke on him and take his combat specialist off the objective. This put me at scoring 3 objectives to his 2, so I get 3 points to his 2 on the primary. And then I do score my mission critical supplies and domination for holding the center and the center objective. So I get a total of 5 points for round 1 to his 2 on the primary. Second turn, I roll a 10 for the initiative to his 9 and take movement for the second turn. My first action is I decide to charge the gunners that are going to be threatening my Hulks with their Overwatch. With the fly in the middle, the half of the charge targets can't see to fire Overwatch. I choose his leader on the other side of the building, midfield, who is my closest charge, and then the gunners I really want in the back right on the objective that I want my Nasher Screamer to charge, unaffected by Overwatch. He fails Overwatch with a pistol on his leader, but I only roll a 6 on the charge. I just catch the leader, but not the guys in the back right. I attempted to do it again with the same charge targets with another fly, attempting the folks in the back right again. This time I get a 7, but I still only make it to the leader again in the midfield. Next, I say, hey, heck with it, and I go ahead and charge the 2 gunners in the back right with my Nasher Screamer. This is something I really want to go off. He can just see my arm enough to make Overwatch. He gets a hit and a wound with plasma, but I actually sink my Disgusting, and then I go for the charge. I nervously roll the dice. With much hooting and hollering, I make the roll and I nail it. Sweet relief. Being I still had a command point for a charge reroll, I decided to get crazy and charge his midfield gunners with my Hulk in the middle, since I at least had his leader tied up from Overwatch. I charged the two that can't see me specifically to avoid being shot at, since I was already reduced to a flesh wound. I failed the charge with a roll of a 6. I only needed a 7, the average on 2 dice, so I decided to reroll with the command point and not Rancid Vomit this turn. I almost decided to take the failed distance and attempt to get a kill with Puke, but the risk of being shot and killed wasn't near as strong as an outcome as if I made the charge. I took the gamble and I missed the charge on the second roll. I decided to stay put and keep trying to score the middle. Next, I scooped my flesh-wounded Gellerpox Mutant in the bottom left to hug cover while scoring to help with survivability. I then advanced my leader around the bins on the bottom right to the objective that the Nash Screamer just left behind from his charge. Now, not worried about shooting after engaging the threats on that side of the board, I feel safe on the objective with my leader out from behind cover. In his movement, he goes ahead and readies all of his shooters not engaged in the movement, and we just go right to shooting. He starts with his arc rifle, targeting my flesh-wounded combat Hulk on the middle objective. He gets 2 hits rapid fire despite the obscurity. Strength 6, he needs a 3 to wound, and I fail my disgusting. He needs a 4 to take my Hulk out of action to the flesh wound due to the flesh wound and being within 1 inch of the obstruction to his shot. He rolls a 2, giving the Hulk a second flesh wound. He shoots with his next rifleman at the Hulk in rapid fire. He lands 2 hits, but he only lands 1 wound. I fail my 6+ save, but I make the 5 up disgusting. I continue to stand tall. Then his next guy fires. He hits, but he fails to wound against my Hulk's toughness 5. He then moves to his sniper rifle. He spends a command point to give it +1 to hit and targets my Gellerpox Mutant on the objective in the bottom left. He hits and he wounds. I fail my invulnerable save and my disgusting, and he gets the out of action roll on the injury table. The first model's off the table for me. Luckily, I still had a backup fly over there holding the objective after losing the mutant. For his last shot, he rapid fires once more into my Hulk for a last try at taking him out. He gets 1 out of 2 hits, but does not make the wound with his strength 4 to my toughness 5. So, we move into the fight phase. I start with my Zealot Nash Screamer, fighting both of his gunners on the objective in the top right. I have 5 attacks on the charge with the Zealot, and I split the attacks 3 on one and 2 on the other. I land 2 hits on the 3 attacks, and I get 2 wounds. At -2 AP, he fails his 2 6+ saves. I roll 2 dice on the injury table because the attacks are 2 damage, and I roll a 4+ to take the first model out of action. On the 2 remaining attacks, I get no 4+s to hit, and the 1 model remains alive, putting me in contestment to the objective but not scoring. I use my 1 command point to try and get a hit on a reroll, and I still miss. Had I killed the other model, I would have taken him off the objective instead of just contest. We go ahead and resolve him fighting back with the remaining gunner. He gets a hit and a wound. I fail my save, but make my disgusting. We then move on to the 2 flies I have engaged with his leader in the middle side of the board. The flies get D3 attacks each. I roll a single attack and get my 4+ to hit. I need a 5 to wound due to his toughness 3 and the flies being only strength 2, but I fail to wound. I then fight with the second fly. I get 2 attacks this time, and I land a 4+ to hit, and then I land a 6 on the wound roll. He needs to make a regular save, and he fails on a roll of a 1. I throw my injury roll with much excitement, but just land a flesh wound. He goes ahead and fights back with his leader, but he ends up whiffing. He has -1 to hit on the flies, plus -1 from the flesh wound. He could not make a connect. This time in scoring, I have 3 objectives to his 1 for my contesting Nasher and Screamer. I score all 3 of my secondaries for holding in middle and killing in the fight phase. Going into turn 3, the score goes 11-3. Once again in turn 3, I win initiative again. My first move is to attempt to charge the middle again with the Nightmare Hulk, now with 2 flesh wounds. This time I make an 11 on the roll and I get there without issue, but he will be 6 to hit in combat now. We then take our fly midfield and we charge his leader and every other model within 12 because he can't be seen, including the model left engaged with the Nasher Screamer in the top right. We want to make these combats remain ongoing so he doesn't fall back and leave the Hulk or the flies open to shooting without being able to fight, as you can't charge the turn you fall back from. I rolled a big 10 on the fly's charge. I decide instead of worrying about keeping the combats locked, I'll just charge all 3 of his gunners standing side by side. This negates all the shooting I was worried about if he falls back, and if he falls back from the objective with the Nasher Screamer, then I will own it, ensuring that I will get my 3 points despite what happens in the middle. With still a turn to spare to go back to the middle and capture the rest of my secondaries, I know if I score 3 more points on the primary in turn 3, I will not need any objectives on turn 4 to focus on maxing out my secondaries. Because I had the right corner on lock for contesting or scoring, and most all of his shots locked, I decided to see if I could advance my leader in the bottom right to the middle objective to go ahead and guarantee my secondaries his turn. But the advance roll was too low to make it, so I remained on the corner objective. He goes ahead and falls back with his leader, and the gunner engaged with my Nash or Screamer. At the start of the shooting, I decided to puke on his plasma with my combat Hulk in the mid-center that charged. I land 3 5+s, which gives me 3 mortal wounds. I roll a single dice on the injury table, and I nailed a 4+, taking one of his 3 gunners that I charged with my fly out of action. His first shot, he tried to take a shot into my Nashers on the objective with a +1 to hit that he just fell back from. He rolls a 1 and re-rolls due to being a sniper. He gets a hit and a wound. He does 2 damage with a D3 damage result. I roll a 5 and a 6 on my Disgusting though, and I take no damage. He fires a long shot with his last shot, and he misses. So a uneventful shooting phase for him, unfortunately. In the combat, we start with the Combat Hulk, who needs 6 to hit now. Had I saved any command points instead of doing Rancid Vomit, I could have done just Gritted Teeth and fought without any negative modifiers to my double flesh wounds. I kind of thought about this after the fact, though. I ended up missing all 4 attacks, of course, needing 6 to hit, and I move on to my fly that charged all the gunners. D3 attacks, I get 3 attacks this time. I land all 3 hits, but 2 of the attacks hits were 6s. For the Eye Stinger, their attacks count as wounds on 6s to hit. So now he owes me 2 saves as I failed the 3rd wound roll. He misses his save, and the fly rolls a 5 and takes a gunner out of action. Always a happy day when a fly can kill something. He fights back against my double flesh-wounded Combat Hulk. He lands a hit and the 5+ to wound. I fail my 6+. He's getting excited, but I make my 5 up Disgusting, living up to its name. So at the end of round 3, I max all 3 primaries, and due to my fly still being alive in the center, I score all 3 of my secondaries again, leaving 1 point away from maxing, needing a final cut apart. We go into turn 4, 17-4 in the Gellerpox favor. Finally, on the 4th turn, the Admech win the initiative. He decides to ready everything. I charge my Nasher into the gunner who fell back from him in the previous round. He misses his overwatch, and I make the short charge, no longer worried about being on the objective, just trying to achieve cut apart. I charge my flies into his flesh-wounded leader to maximize kill potential. I make it with both of the flies. Now all my targets for his shooting are engaged, giving him no shots. I use Gritted Teeth tactic this time for 1 command point for my Combat Nightmare Hulk to ignore his flesh wounds when fighting. I'm able to get 1 -2 AP, 2 damage wound through, and gets the out of action roll. The Nasher Screamer fights and kills his target as well. The flies then fight and wound and roll a flesh wound on the leader. He fights back and does not get a kill. The game ends and I get my max points to his 5. It was a 30-minute game and a 90-minute round. Fast and Furious, first game of the event, was feeling good about the potential of the day. That's the first battle, everyone. I hope you enjoyed. Let's go to match 2. All right, everyone, this is game 2. The mission is called Pivotal Point. There are 6 objectives. There's a search and destroy-like deployment zone. It has a 12-inch circumference circle in the center of the board, making a 6-inch half circle going into each of our deployment zones. Each of us control a sector of the board. This time, I'm going to be fighting Necrons, and it turns out that it's the infamous Necron Chuck. I'd actually listened to him on a podcast about his success at LVO, getting 3rd with Necrons on the way up to Adepticon. So I was very excited to play a renowned player. I later ended up actually having an interview with Chuck that you can find on our SoundCloud in the description below. In this mission, like each mission, we secretly chose our secondaries. This time, I chose Scout the Field, which is to be within 1 inch of 3 different board edges. I chose Sector Cleared, which is the mission specific to this particular mission, and that is to control 2 empty adjacent quarters. And finally, I chose Thin the Ranks to kill 2 enemy models in the same turn. We have a roll-off for placing terrain. I win the roll-off for terrain, and I take the largest building and place it in a diagonal on the corner of the bottom right to cover the objective and also create an angle that is a line of sight blocker that will extend in the other side of the board for setting up charges. He sets up his piece of the terrain in the opposite corner of mine that creates obstruction from that objective. Next, I set up another piece covering another objective from line of sight. We decided that the last 2 crates will be building pieces subject to the 3-inch rule from any terrain or board edges, saving a few pieces of pipe as our last scatter terrain placements. I place my crate vertically in the middle of the board. Lacking many choices, he places his vertically in the bottom right corner. We then place the pipes, his midfield, and I place mine to give cover to the bottom middle objective. We then verify our understanding of how the terrain will operate in the game, jumping right through broken windows and over pipes. Then we roll for sides. I lose the roll-off and I choose the side I had oriented my terrain drops around and place the first model. I start with my leader on the objective, behind a wall, unable to be seen by however he deploys. He positions his first drop and cover on his deployment line, holding the middle objective. Next, I place all my flies, and he sets up nearly all his models on the deployment line, more forward and aggressive than I had anticipated. I place my Hulks last, as close to the center as I can to be ready to charge into his deployment. We have an epic handshake and on to the roll for initiative. I get a 7, Nurgle's number, but he gets an 8 and takes the first move, usually my preference on the first turn. His Zealot Flayed one advances to the upper right corner with a big advance roll. He advances another warrior to the midfield objective. He makes moves off his deployment line with his Flayed ones to the bottom left objective into the sector I secretly want to keep cleared for my secondary. He fortifies his midfield objective with another gunner. He left his leader in the top left corner ready on the objective. In my movement, I start by advancing the Ice Stinger in the bottom right and getting a 15-inch move. That gets me all the way to the other objective on the far left. I want to pile bodies on the objective to deny him from scoring. Take a second fly from the center and do the same thing. I then advance my Nash or Screamer towards the objective, but I only get a 3 on the advance and fall just short of winning the objective with body count. First re-rolling the advance, I gamble on killing a Flayed one with Rancid Vomit. I advance my veteran Gellerpox Mutant to hold the objective in the center field, staying just out of 12 of his gauze up the board to make him a long shot. Feeling secure with his long range plus obstruction and having a 5+ invulnerable followed by a disgusting save, I think I'll be okay. I then take my Eye Stinger that was on the line in the right middle, and versus contesting the Flayed one on the objective, I go mid-board, hiding out of line of sight to set up my next turn's charge. I then go ahead and charge my other Eye Stinger from the mid-right into his Flayed one he moved to the objective to gamble a chance of denying him the score. I make the charge with no struggle. My Combat Hulk goes into the center and avoids being shot by 3 shooters in the middle, and only takes shots from 2 gunners in the upper left, one being long range and both being obstructed, setting up that turn 2 charge. At the start of the shooting, I do the important Rancid Vomit for 2 command points on his Combat Specialist Flayed one, contesting the objective with me in the left-hand corner. I get the 5 on 3d6, causing a mortal wound and reducing him to 0. I roll the injury with much excitement, praying to not roll a 6 due to the Necron's reanimation protocols. No command point reroll available. I hit a 2 and just cause a flesh wound on the Flayed one, to my dismay. Shooting resumes with Necron resolving all their shots. First shot he takes is a long-range obstructive shot into my veteran holding the bottom center objective for me. He starts by spending 1 command point for targeting optics that gives him +1 to hit versus obscured targets, now hitting me on a 4+. He misses on 2 though. Next, he takes a long-range shot at the veteran again with a -2 to hit. He misses with a 4. Then, he fires his leader, buffed by Comm Specialist, to shoot at my veteran with a 4+ this time. He hits and he wounds this time. I fail my 5+ invulnerable and then my disgusting. Luckily, I still set myself up with a modifier to the injury by being within 1 inch of the obstruction. He rolls just the flesh wound. But he gambles and does a tactical reroll and he nails the 5+ needed to take me out of action. Huge kill, getting me off the objective, now guaranteeing holding more, unless my fly can kill his Flayed one in the upper right-hand corner. His Comm Specialist takes a long-range shot at my Nasher, gets a hit and a wound. I fail my save, taking him down to 3 wounds left. His warrior takes another long-range shot, hits, but he fails to wound on the Nasher. We go to combat. I get my D3 attacks with a fly, but I only roll 1 attack. I land my 4+ to hit, but I need a mighty 6 to wound. I miraculously land the 6 to wound, and now my hopes are up to turn things around. He goes for his save, and he fails it.
Nurgle, bless me, I cry. He has no command points for the reroll. I roll the injury roll with much hype, and I nail the 4+. I dance all around our table, Night of the Roxbury style, and I make a big scene as I am overjoyed with the fact that I killed his Flayed one with my parasite there. Into the round, we both now hold 2 primary objectives, and in the round at a tie of 2 each, neither of us scoring any secondaries. Going into round 2, he wins the initiative again, and I announce a decisive move. He decides to counter decisive move, and we have a roll-off. Unfortunately for me, he wins the roll. He declares a charge with his unwounded Flay one in the bottom left and runs in and charges all 3 of my models. A huge move. This is where I wanted to charge and do this to him. So now I choose my fly in the center who can't be seen as an alternative activation and charge everything within 12. I only roll a 5 for the charge range that makes it into no one, so I go ahead and use my last command point for a tactical reroll. On the reroll, I make a good charge distance. I decide that who I will engage with is to the 2 Necrons in the midfield objective in order to nullify the shooting from those models this turn. Movement goes back to the Necrons. He readies his leader in the top left again, and he moved 1 gunner to the objective in the top right to contest the objective versus my fly, who won combat last round. His wounded Flayed one is in the bottom left, joins the multi-combat with the other flies and Nash or Screamer. He decides to go ahead and throw more attacks into the fly, holding up his gunners in the midfield, and charges in with the warrior. Movement resumes back to the Gellerpox. After much debate, I had to make a decision to go ahead and move my combat specialist Hulk to the bottom center objective where he had just killed my Gellerpox mutant. I would have rather have gone into his deployment zone or midfield. I'm curious how that would have changed things, but I decided that it was more important to get on that objective this turn. Next, another tough decision, knowing that I either charge the warrior in the top right and take Overwatch or just get shot at in the shooting phase. I decided I'd rather him be 6 to hit and make the charge into his warrior. Unfortunately, though, he lands a 6 on the hit in Overwatch, only needing a 2 to wound. He lands the 2+, then only needing a 3 to take the fly out of action. He gets it done with much to my disappointment. Chuck celebrates with as much enthusiasm as my dance I had from last turn when I killed his Flayed one with my fly. We go to the shooting phase. He takes a ready shot from his leader again at my midfield Hulk and fails at the only shot of turn 2. We go to combat, and he starts with fighting with his charging Necron in the top middle against my charging fly. He hits me even with a -1 and lands his 2+ to wound, but he whiffs the injury roll of a 3+ and my fly lives. He declares a reroll for the statistically favorable 3+, but he fails a second time, much to my excitement. The flies also do not take flesh wounds, so he remains locked in that combat. I allocate my charging flies attacks at the warrior who hasn't fought yet instead of the immortal due to it having a 4+ save versus a 3+ save. I get D3 attacks but only 1 hit and I fail to wound. He then moves on to his Flayed one into my 2 flies contesting the objective in the bottom left. He manages a hit and the wound barely on a 2 and gets the 3+ to take the first fly out. He hits and wounds the second fly, but he fails the out-of-action roll, leaving 1 fly standing. Then he fights with his flesh-wounded combat Flayed one. He puts all of his attacks into the fly, needing 5s to hit from the flesh wound and the innate -1 on the fly. Unfortunately for him, he misses with all of his attacks. I then have the fly attack back, but I do not wound. Then I roll the 4 attacks with the Nasher and Screamer, but unfortunately I miss everything. I use my last command point for the round to try and get a single 4+ to hit. Luckily I landed it. Now I just need a 3 to wound, rerolling 1s of my cleaver. No CP to reroll a 2 though, and what do you know? I roll a 2, much to my dismay. I consolidate with my Nasher to contest the objective. He swings with his remaining warrior and immortal in the top center to try and clear my fly, but he misses with both attacks. At the end of round 2, Chucks holds 3 objectives to my 2, thanks to killing the fly in Overwatch in the top right, bringing the score to 5-4 in the Necron's favor on primary. I was unable to score any of my secondaries. Honestly, I wasn't paying enough attention to scout the field like I should, and I was being too focused on the primaries and trying to deny him. He was able to score attrition and thin the ranks for killing 2 of my units in the round and killing more than me, taking the score 7-4 going into round 3. Chuck wins the initiative at going into turn 3. Once again, we take a close look at the options for him to fall back from the fly in the top middle and make it to the top right objective, but we determine it's not enough distance due to needing to be able to go around the terrain piece. He decides to fall back from the fly engagement in the top middle anyways while keeping range to the objective. He moves off the objective in the top right to go ahead and put a gun down the backfield at my leader holding the objective in the far right corner. Chuck decides to fall back away from my Nasher Screamer to leave the Nasher and Fly standing there in place in the bottom left objective. His Flayed one still stays in range of the objective though. It goes back to me to move. I decide to fall back my Nasher to the bottom left corner to position myself for Scout the Field secondary while keeping in range to Rancid Vomit. I then attempt to charge my Nightmare Hulk from the bottom middle into the Flayed one on the left side of the field. I fail with a roll of a 4, which isn't even enough failed distance to put me in contesting range of the objective. I decide to tactically re-roll and sacrifice the Rancid Vomit for the turn. I get rewarded with a roll of a big 8, enough distance to tag both Flayed ones, giving me a chance to remove them from that board quarter, helping me get my sector cleared secondary and the objective. This allows me then to fall back with a Fly to the middle center objective, replacing the charging Hulk. I then fall back with my Fly that was engaged with all the warriors in the center to the objective he left behind in the far right, putting us both on 3 before the resolution of shooting and combat. When I move my Fly to the top right objective, I try to position myself to be able to score the objective and be within obscurity. It was a very tough call to agree upon the obscurity or not, but Chuck was a gentleman and offered a roll-off for obstruction, in which I got the agreed upon 4+, granting me the obstruction I desired. I study my leader's movement in the bottom right. He has his Necron warrior's weapons trained on my leader to take him off the objective. I try to pre-measure to see if I can hold the objective and still throw a grenade at his model, but it was too far of a range to throw the grenade and hold. So I opt to get as much obstruction as possible and brace for the shots. Go into the shooting phase. Being that I spent my 1 command point for the tactical reroll on the charge, I had no Rancid Vomit, and all the shooting goes to the Necrons. His first shot, he lines up a shot with his readied leader in the back left to take a shot at my Fly on the objective in the top right. He needs a 6 to hit the Fly with 1 shot, and he doesn't make it. Then he has to decide to fire on my leader in the bottom right or the Fly on the objective in the top right. He spends a command point for targeting optics, +1 to hit, and he ends up targeting the Fly. He lands a hit and then just needs a 2 to wound and then a 4 to kill for being within 1 inch of obstruction. He gets it done and he takes me off the objective. Now he's in a good position. We move to combat. We start with my charging combat Hulk in the bottom left. I split my attacks 2 and 2 into the Flayed ones. I land a wound on my first set of attacks, giving him a 6+ save after the -2 from the Hulk, and he fails the save. I nervously roll my injury on 2 dice, praying to not roll a 6 against his reanimation protocols, bringing him to full health. I roll a 6 on one of my 2 dice, and I decide to use my last command point to reroll both the dice. I managed to land a 4 this time for an out of action without rolling a 6, and I yell out for the glorious kill. 1 Flayed, 1 down, 1 to go. I roll my next set of 2 attacks, and I only land 1 hit. I rolled a 3+ to wound, and I land the 4, giving him another 6+ save. He rolls the save, and he makes it, much to my dismay, landing the big 6. We both cheer, though, because it's such an epic roll, and we have a high five together. He swings back, and he whiffs with his Flayed one in return, and we go to scoring. At the end of the round, we both hold only 2 objectives, so we tie on the primary for round 3. Neither of us scores secondaries for the round. I got greedy trying to position for Scout the Field. Had I just kept my Nasher on the objective with my Hulk, I could have been 1 point higher by scoring more. But due to moving away from the objective, I only tied. And we go into the final round, 9-6, with a 3-point lead by the Necrons. In round 4, I roll an 8 for the initiative, but Chuck rolls a 9. He gets priority again on the final turn. Chuck moves to grab the objective in the top right. He then adjusts to line up a shot on the Fly down the center. His final move is to fall back from my combat Hulk, leaving him unable to fight for the round. I decide to advance my leader and try to make it to the center objective to present a harder kill than the Fly, and then move the Fly to where the leader was, having to survive 1 shooter at -2 to hit, instead of several. I roll a 5 on the advance for my leader, just what I needed to follow through with the plan. So I move my leader over to the middle objective, and I take the Fly and jump over to the objective in the far right. I then charge in my Nasher Screamer to hit his fallen back Flayed one in the midboard, attempting to get double secondary by killing more and sector cleared. I'm able to land the charge roll, guarantee me the objective in the left by now having 2 bodies on it. Start of the shooting, I attempt to kill the charged Flayed one with the Rancid Vomit. I just need to die somehow, some way. I managed to get a 5 on the 3 dice roll and an out of action on the injury roll, killing the Flayed one that had fallen back. At this point, I'm set up for a 4-point score by the end of the round. He takes his one gunner in the top right and he shoots at my fly in the bottom right objective. He uses targeting optics to ignore the obstruction and be forced to hit. He hits with both shots and lands the wound. He only needs a 4 to kill, and he lands the roll and takes me off the objective, guaranteeing the victory at this point. He resolves the rest of the shots into my leader on the midfield objective. I make my save versus his first shooter. He misses with the next, and he misses with his next 2 shots. He uses his last command point on his last shot and makes the hit and the wound. I fail my invulnerable save and my disgusting. He rolls for the out of action, and just for my pride's sake, he thankfully only received a flesh wound. At the end of the round, I take a broken test and I end up breaking. I use my last command point to auto-pass to my leader on the middle objective, and then I roll low enough on my leadership to pass on my Nash Screamer on his nerve check, securing me to the objective still. Unfortunately, though, the Nightmare Hulk shakes. At the end of the round, I was able to get sector cleared for the first time in the game, and the score ends up being 9-11 in the Necrons' favor. What a fantastic game against an excellent opponent. Chuck knows what he's doing, and I hope you guys enjoyed the match. Check out our podcast to listen to a tactics talk with Chuck after watching this episode. Thank you. Okay, match 3. Necrons again. The chance for the Gellerpox vengeance. Facing off versus an opponent named Nate. This time we're playing Mission 3 Yard by Yard. This is a 3-inch deployment zone that goes against the long edge of the deployment map. There's 5 objectives. This mission is different than the first 2 in that you can only score 1 point, 3 points, or 5 points in the primary. 1 if you hold any number of objectives, 3 if you hold more than your opponent, and 5 if you hold all 5. This mission is also unique in the fact that it is scored by wound count versus model count, for models that are wholly within 3 inches of the center of the objective, versus partially within just 2 of the center. This is a great mission for my Nightmare Hulks as they count for 4 wounds per each Hulk, giving me a little bit of an advantage in this mission. In addition, this one has a freebie secondary for the Gellerpox in that you can score a secondary point if you choose not to shoot, called Swift and Subtle, the mission-specific secondary. My other secondaries I chose were Proximity Alert, to have 2 of my models within 2 inches of enemy models, and Thin their ranks, to kill 2 models in a turn. We go to place terrain. He gets to place the first piece, and he places it to cover one of the objectives. I take the next largest building section and go ahead and hit the middle before there is no serious line of sight blocking pieces to hit the center of the board with. He then hits some ruins in the corner. I mirror him and place one in the other. He hits a small piece in the mid-top side. I put some cover for the bottom right objective. He goes ahead and places a mid-bottom, and then I finish with a vertical crate. We then go to scatter, where we place wherever we want, no longer tethered to the 3 inches from board edges and 3 inches from other pieces of terrain. He puts a statue in the center and provides some more line of sight blocking, and I put a piece in the top, providing some more line of sight blocking up there. We roll for sides, and he loses the roll off, getting to pick his side. He chooses the side that he oriented himself around and goes ahead and places the first model. He positions a warrior down the center firing lane. I match his placement by starting with my flies. I hit a fly in each corner, and he fortifies his corners of the board to grab objectives as well. We clarify the terrain about jumping through windows and corners of terrain pieces, etc. And then he goes ahead and continues to fortify the center lane behind the obstructing ruin. I put my leader center field, giving him thought to which way I'm going to go with him. I then go ahead and put my veteran Gellerpox mutant beside the leader, adding to the questions of my actions. He puts his Flayed ones ready to come down the left and right lanes of the middle. I go ahead and put my Hulks centrally, ready to go either way towards or around the terrain, knowing the center objective is just on the other side of the ruined wall, and based on my placement of the building, I can score it from the other side of the wall without being seen. On turn 1, he wins the initiative and we proceed. He advances his Flayed ones to the center objective to put as many bodies there as he can. Both his combat and Zealot Flayed ones go there, and he then joins the cause with a warrior to the center. With the rest of his movement, he moves forward to grab the objectives in the left and right corners on his side of the board, and he readies his shooters in the middle lane. My first move is to advance my Hulks into the center. I know I can steal the objective with just one body making it from the other side of the wall. With my 4 wounds to his 3, I roll a low advance and not making it to the objective on my first move. I move to the window of the ruin to get a chance to puke on the Flayed one through the window. I advance my veteran Gellerpox mutant up into the middle, getting on range of the objective. I try to advance the Nash Screamer, and on a roll of a 3, I fall short again of being able to make it to in range of the objective. so no Hulk made it, and he still controls it. I then advance a fly into range of the objective as well. We advance our leader over the objective in the left-hand corner, making sure to be out of line of sight of any of his current active shooters. I move my smallest fly to the objective on the right corner, also hiding from line of sight. This made me secure from being shot off the objectives for my final fly to go to the center and put a third wound on the objective, contesting the center. At the start of the shooting, I spend 2 command points to do Rancid Vomit through the window on a Zealot Flayed one. Rolling 3 dice looking for 5s, doing mortal wounds, I hit a 5 and do a mortal wound, but only roll a flesh wound on the injury test. The Necrons then take control of the rest of the shooting. He starts off with a shot that can angle through the window of the middle building there. He chooses to shoot 1 shot into each fly as they are within 2 inches of each other. He lands the hit on one and misses the other, does a tactical reroll on the miss and hits that too. He rolls and wounds both flies. He ends up killing one and failing to take the other out of action. He then goes ahead with his shooting through the window of the building that the Nightmare Hulk puked through. He boosts the shooting with his comm specialist. He hits, but he fails to wound against my toughness 5. In the end of round 1, he ends up with more bodies on the center, being that he killed my fly from through the window. So for the first round, he gets 3 primary to my 1. Through the wall, we were both within 2 inches of 2 of each other's models, so we both were able to score proximity alert, revealing that secondary. And then of course I scored another for the mission-specific Swift and Subtle for not shooting. This put the round score to 4-3 in the Necrons' favor going into turn 2. Turn 2, Necrons win the initiative. I decided a decisive move and charge his units on the other side of the wall with my fly. I wanted to lock him up so I can easily score the center with my higher wound count, Unthreatened. I make the charge and tag all 3 of his models at once. He moves a gunner up the left side of the board to try to get an angle on the bottom left models on the objective. He then readies everything else. I start my move with trying to charge my combat Hulk into the crowd in the middle, supporting the fly. I failed the charge though, and I decided to take the failed distance, setting me up for next turn. I sacrificed my Nash Screamer, setting up for combat, just to move wholly within 3 of the objective through the wall. This guarantees scoring. His hulking body actually helps hide the Gellerpox Mutant that was through the window as well. Then I move my leader in the bottom left just enough to the right so he and the fly cannot be seen by the Necron coming up the left side of the board. In his shooting, he puts his first ready shot into the Hulk in the middle. He gets a hit but does not wound against my toughness 5 again. He then comms upgrades his leader shooting and he gets both his hits. He lands one of his wounds but does a tactical reroll and gets a second one to go with it. It cuts through my armor save with his AP -1, so I owe him 2 disgusting saves. I pass 1 and fail 1 and the Hulk goes down to 3 wounds. The comms then takes his shot and gets both hits, but he fails to wound, unfortunately for him. This puts us into combat. We start out with my charging fly into his 3 models, 2 Flayed ones and the warrior. I go ahead and put my attacks into the Zealot Flayed one that got the flesh wound from last round for my Rancid Vomit. I get D3 attacks and roll for 3 of them. I get 1 hit, needing a 6 to wound, and I fail to wound. He then swings with his combat Flayed one with a -1 to hit against the fly. He gets 2 hits and 2 wounds and rolls a 4 for the out of action, freeing those models from being engaged. When he consolidates, he does so in such a way that we both score proximity alert again at the end of the turn. I was able to get 3 on the primary for holding more, and I got Swift and Subtle secondary again for not shooting, along with proximity alert. We then are able to go into turn 3, this time 8-6 in my favor. On turn 3, Necrons win the initiative again. I decide to decisive move, once again, to charge my Hulk into the 3 models in the center once more, protecting me from shooting and shutting down his options. This also puts the second Hulk on the objective, giving me a total of 9 wound counts on the center. In his movement, he takes his Crons in the upper ruins and moves them out to the middle in front of the crate, passing movement over to me. I then attempt to make a charge with my Nash Screamer around the building and into the middle combat. I roll a fat 9 of the charge, so he's loving it and makes it. I double check that my leader is clear of shooting, and I make an adjustment to remove myself from sight yet again in the bottom left corner. I get my Mutant in the middle building to be within an inch of the wall that is obstructing the gunner that's trained on him to help out on the injury roll of wounded. Going into shooting, he goes ahead and shoots rapid fire at me through the window, middle building at my Gellerpox Mutant. He gets 1 hit out of 2 and decides to use a tactical reroll for a second hit. Unfortunately, he still misses on the reroll. But he does get 1 successful wound through. I failed my save and my disgusting. He rolls on the injury roll, but he only lands a flesh wound on the Gellerpox Mutant. He can't re-roll it because he used a tactical re-roll to hit with the shooting attack. We then, after all shooting has now been complete due to lack of targets, we go into combat. He goes ahead and chooses to use Decisive Strike and fight first. He swings his combat Flayed one first into my Hulk with 3 wounds left. He fails to connect with any of the wounds though. I then go to fight with my Zealot Nash or Screamer, now with 5 attacks for charging. We split our attacks, 1 into the Zealot Flayed one with a flesh wound, and 2 and 2 into the other Flayed one and Warrior. The first 2 attacks I make, I get 1 hit, but I rolled a 2 to wound. I re-rolled my last command point, but I roll a 1 and whiff again. My next 2 attacks, they both connect and wound, giving him 2 saves to make on a 6+. I get past his save and I roll a 2 damage injury roll, but I don't get a 4, 5, or 6, just double flesh wounds. I fail to hit on my final attack. So basically whiffed with the Zealot. I swing with my combat specialist next and I just whiff with all my hits again. He fights with his next Flayed one and managed to get a wound off on the Hulk, bringing him down to 2 wounds left. Luckily, due to wound count being what scores, I end up heavily scoring the middle objective, getting more objectives for the round. So I get 3 more on the primary for holding more and max out Swift and Subtle for not shooting, and we also both max out Proximity Alert on the 3rd turn. This puts the score 8-13 in my favor going into the final round. In the final round, Necrons win the initiative once again with a roll of a 9. I decide to do a decisive move for the 3rd time. I decide I need to do this because if I don't, then he could fall back from the combat that my Hulks are in and unload his unengaged shooters into my models. My Gellerpox Mutant is the closest in the ruin, so I take a gamble and go for it. I do the decisive move and I land a 7-inch charge, which is just able to put me within an inch of a model that both Hulks were engaged with, making it so they can't fall back. This protects me from shooting and a worthy gamble to lock down the game. He then resumes his movement after my decisive move. He goes ahead and Hail Marys his warrior in the upper middle into the combat with the Hulks, trying to put bodies on the objective. He advances his Necron from the upper right down to my objective in the corner to contest against my fly. Once movement is back to me, I go ahead and charge his warrior on the far left that he moved up to target my leader. I make the charge with no struggle. This takes away the shots against my leader and taking me off that objective. I go ahead and charge my fly in the bottom right into the warrior that he moved into my face. But he actually lands a hit in Overwatch and takes the fly out. We go to combat, and being that he has initiative, he swings on my charging mutant with one of his charging Necrons and gets a wound through my saves. He rolls a big 6 on the out of action and he puts the Gellerpox Mutant veteran down. He then swings into my Nash or Screamer next and wounds me down to 3 wounds left. I fight back with my combat specialist and I do 2 and 2 into the guys that hadn't fought yet. First guy I allocate my attacks against, I get my hit through, but I roll a 2 to wound. I go ahead and tactically re-roll the 2 to wound and get the wound through with a -2 AP 2 damage, but he nails the 6-up save, nullifying the attack again. I do my other 2 attacks left from the combat specialist. This time I get 2 hits, but land double 2s and fail to wound. Second turn of whiffing in combat. He attacks against my Hulk, now with 1 wound left, but he cannot connect with a wound. For my Zealot, I split my attacks in half, miss versus the first target, and land into the second. I roll a 1 to wound, but thanks to my Nash or Cleaver re-rolling 1s, I re-roll and connect. But again, he rolls another 6+ save, once again causing no damage output from the Nightmare Hulks. He then fights with another of his models against my 1 wound left Hulk. He hits and wounds, but this time I make the 6+ save. At the end of the round scoring, he was able to get thin the ranks for killing 2 of my models, and we both tied on the primaries, getting 2 objectives apiece. So both only scoring 1 point on the primary for the final turn. This puts the final score 10-14 with a Gellerpox victory and vengeance versus the Necrons. Nate was a fun opponent, and we had a great time. I hope you guys enjoyed this pod.